They say grief is the price we pay for love, and on this new album by Tori Amos, she explores the cost of loving, living and loneliness. But is it any good? Let's find out, shall we? Welcome classic rock fans to an episode of New Album Review, and today we're looking at Tori Amos' Ocean to Ocean. If you haven't already done so, please be sure to click like, subscribe and check that bell. And if you do have a moment, check some of the links below this video for ways you can support the sterling work done here at Classic Album Review. It's always much appreciated. Interesting, the word trauma is derived from Greek meaning wound, and Tori is no stranger to bleeding profusely through her music in which she explores the deep psychological scarring incurred from the rough and tumble of life, including that ghastly experience that prompted the very terrifyingly deadpan Me and a Gun, the loss of another soul in Spark, from loneliness and kind of emotional distancing touched upon in songs like Winter and Here in My Head. And the emotion explored on this album is assiduous and effective, as grief and isolation are explored amid those typical Tori tropes, I would have to say. Her breathy vocals, a sombre and sweet piano sound, all accompanying that those emotional writhings of her voice. It's that sort of honesty in her refrains that makes her covers of songs like The Stones' Angie, Joni Mitchell's A Case of You, and Nirvana's Smells Like Teen Spirit so effective and affecting. She lends an honesty and purity to the proceedings. I also like those very trill and ghostly sounds she manages to get with her voice, and that piano sound. A song like Thoughts, for example, which I think was the B-side of Winter, casting my mind far back into the nebula there, or the very sweet and sublime Honey, of course an outtake from the Under the Pink album. I must admit I rather enjoy her later material. She seems to explore a spirituality and a sense of rootedness, I think, more in her later material, which is what makes this album so intriguing. It's an album that very much harkens back to the sound of her first two albums, discounting the Why Can't Tori Read project, of course. I'm talking of Little Earthquakes and Under the Pink. And it seems to be one about it being emotionally uprooted as well as shaken by the jarring effect of the loss of her mother, something I can fully concur with, as I lost my mother only this June. But I have to say her later albums belie maturity, I think. I think Life on the Cornish Coast obviously agrees with her. But on this record we do get a very touching meditation on grief. There's some political stuff on here as well. Robert Frost famously said that poetry is about grief, politics is about the grievance. And I have to say the stuff on this album that works well for me is the songs that address the former. Songs like Addition of Light Divides, Flowers Burnt to Go on 29 Years are absolutely exquisite, gorgeous textually as they unfold around the beautiful use of her voice. Some of the fabric of these songs is absolutely remarkable. I mean, for example, Birthday Baby has an enormous cinematic quality to it. We also get the superb, if not batty, Spies and the gorgeous Speaking with Trees, which is so beautiful that it almost borders on the obscene, I think. Especially with its use of melody and those soft tonal phrasings of hers. You get Metal Wood Water, which has a brittle quality. It reminds me a little bit of the atmosphere evoked by the song Winter way back from the Little Earthquakes album. It threatens to shatter with restrained emotion at any one time. One thing Tori Amos does really well and has always done really well is this inferred rage. For example, a song like Horses on Boys with Pele, or her somewhat menacing version of This Old Man. Also the way her voice, I love the way her voice mingles with Trent Reznor's on the duo she did with him on the Under the Pink album. Ocean to Ocean also explores Tori's very overt rage at those who exploit the natural world for their own profit, as well as the emotional cost of the pandemic, a sense of emotional and geographical isolation. She says she didn't cope well with the lockdown. Again, another sentiment I fully concur with. For me, I was besieged all sorts of terrors. This is also a record that has a message of hope and healing, which is something we can take something from, I believe. The natural world is a powerful symbol on this album, a symbol of something we all share, but ultimately a symbol of something that renews, very much like our recovery from traumatic events. It's an album that, interestingly, despite focusing on a theme of lack of connection, seems to be imbued with warmth. Speaking with Trees and Flowers Burned to Gold explore a very specific energy, I think, but defines much of the driving force on this record. And she works with some great musicians on this album, there's no doubt about that all, even in isolation or separated, managed to layer these songs and help breathe something into these numbers. Numbers that are beautifully atmospheric as well, from those sighing harmonies of hers to the energy of numbers like Spies. There's no doubt her music has always had a brutal confessional quality, and even employing a lot of religious symbolism. Her music has always employed that symbolism. Maybe it's to do with her father being a pastor and that upbringing she had. From the early single Crucify, of course, to a vitriolic rant against God on Under the Pink. But there's always and always has been expressions of repressed trauma throughout her lyrics. Hopefully she finds her music as cathartic as often we do listening to it, whether it's searching for acceptance or forgiveness, or an intriguing scrutiny of the very nature of sin, or maybe she's just searching for her mother among the clouds, or the spirits in the trees, perhaps. There's nevertheless something very poignant explored with these sentiments on this album, sentiments that are deeply personal, but also quite universal. You know, I love lines like, love is lost and broken. My God, it sounds like a line from a Tennessee Williams play. From the intimate brushstrokes of personal grief to the broader strokes of the current political state of things, all filtered through this lens of personal suffering and isolation. It's absolutely fascinating as we walk through this strange hall of mirrors governed by the pandemic and lockdown. This, of course, is one of those lockdown albums, which has almost become a subgenre in itself. And on this album as well, Tori Amos has always done this. She's explored the power of juxtapositions in her music, and this album is no different. In fact, one critic has noted that juxtaposition is the essence of Amos, who has been masterfully weaving the familiar, strange, tender and unsettling for nearly 30 years. But I think one thing about Tori Amos's music is it has a timeless quality. Such other themes addressed on this record, linked to themes that affect us all, I guess, a collective trauma, if you will. This album is infused with a sense of grief and loss, and that's communicated in the artwork, which uses a lot of dark colours and blues, with Tori looking wistfully into the distance as if searching for something. In fact, one critic has rather waggishly said that the album wears its melancholy on its sleeve. Anyway, let's go through this album track by track. The opening track, The Edition of Light Divided, is fantastic, one of the best tracks on the album, built around that piano sound and her interesting vocal harmony lines that she sings in this. You know, Feeling Broken, I love that refrain as well. It seems to embody much of this album, beautifully accompanied with some flanged guitar, sounding a bit Steve Rothery on us here, I think. And of course those double track vocals, as I said, it makes this track a wonderful, wonderful start to the album. It's a track that is very reminiscent, I think, of those first two albums she did, as I said, discounting the Why Can't Tori Read project. Speaking with Trees, with its very tribal sounding drums, it's all about connecting spiritually, I think. The start of this is fantastic, one of my favourites, and it of course touches upon the loss of her mother, or I think trying to find her mother in the natural world around her. I've been hiding your ashes beneath the treehouse, I cannot let you go. And I love the guitar at the start of this, the way it accompanies beautifully that frenetic piano. I love the song Devil's Bane. It's one of the best ones on the album. It's built around this, perhaps looking at the notion of sin, but it's the way the song seems to be hinged around the acoustic guitar sound. It has an eerie, ghostly opening, which, like many of the numbers on this album, is hauntingly atmospheric. Swim to New York State is a fascinating and beautiful number. The idea of the distance being relative between us all, and distance is irrelevant when you can't leave the house, of course. You know, it speaks of longing and dislocation, and her breathy vocals here are emblematic of an aching sense of loss or the need for connection. Spies, I like to refer to this as the Batty number, and nevertheless that's a very tremulous feel with the prominent bass. I think that it seems to be built around this very walking bass that runs throughout this number. but it provides some real ballast around which the whole number seems to be hinged. Ocean to Ocean uses the ocean as a symbol, something that connects us all, or something that is permanent. Interesting in a song that explores the impermanence of the natural world at the hands of those that just don't give a damn. It's a political tract, but one that doesn't get too annoying. I think it would be served well by an interesting intro by David Attenborough, if that could be arranged. Flowers Burn to Gold, incredibly beautiful number, one of the most beautiful numbers on this album. Poignant and reflects upon the loss of her mother. Where are you? She sings, I scan the skies. It very much touches upon the very nature of grief. When you lose someone, you kind of see them everywhere. Metalwood Water has a moody synth texture to it. Finds Amos shredding past obsessions and ruminating on the year that's passed, and what a dreadful year it's been. You found me burning with despair, she sings. It has been a brutal year. No shit. Take my shattered dream, she says. Her lockdown sounds to have been as bad as mine. 29 Years is one of the most intriguing numbers on this album, as she reflects upon I think the last 30 years of her career. Incidentally, it's been 30 years since the release of the Little Earthquakes album. It beautifully melds the synthesized organs and processed vocals, evoking a story from the Greek myth, of course. Nothing like a bit of Greek myth to start the day. No, Medusa was not always a Gorgon, and no, my witch is not always benevolent, she sings, before touching upon the marital turbulence. Time to defuse bombs I planted in our bed. It's an interesting number as well that seems to look back through her past, especially the last 30 years of her life that have been quite a bit of a roller coaster, I suspect. These tattered bits of me I've been piecing for 29 years. There's almost a very soft reggae feel, reminiscent of The Police or Rush circa Grace Under Pressure. How Glass Is Made has a sombre, melodic reflection on marital tension in a year of earthquakes and those aftershocks. And I love that chiming, lovely musical box sound at the very beginning. And Birthday Baby, the one that ends the album, with a note of renewal, I think. I really enjoy this track. You survived the cosmic apocalypse. It tops the album well, I think. This album evokes the triumph of will and spirit over the dreadful circumstances of our lives, especially over the last couple of years. It has an air of almost resigned vulnerability, which is something I really enjoy. Anyway, I would urge you to give this album a listen, especially if you're a fan of those first two albums. I think you'll enjoy this one. Anyway, if you've managed to get to the end of this review without switching off, I'd like to thank you for doing just that, as well as urging you to keep warm and keep safe, but more importantly that you keep listening.